Now, let me make this clear right at the start. This isn't meant to be a doom and gloom prediction video where I talk about the impending end of the MCU once Endgame's over, or because of a shift in attitude or agenda at Marvel Studios, which many, right or wrong, believe the movie Captain Marvel foretells. Instead, this is mostly going to be a speculation video in regards to what I think Marvel will or should do once the Thanos chapter of the MCU is finally closed, which Endgame will almost certainly do. Because, let's be honest here, the question isn't if Thanos will be stopped, or if all or most of the damage he caused will be undone, it's how will our heroes make that happen, and what price will they have to pay? And I think we can safely assume not all of our heroes are going to come out of the other side of this alive. Some of them will no doubt have to make the ultimate sacrifice, with Captain America and or Iron Man topping the list of likely candidates. And even if one or both of them survive, and I highly doubt they'll both be killed, as I highly doubt they'll both survive, it's unlikely we'll ever see either one of them in another Marvel movie again, or at least featured in another movie. I'm sure cameos are always a possibility, but we'll probably never see Tony Stark suit up and become Iron Man ever again, and Cap's shield will almost certainly be passed on to either Bucky or Falcon. There's also Thor, who is of course played by Chris Hemsworth, and his contract too is also fulfilled, which means this could be his last movie as well. And I don't have to tell you this, but those three characters have been the backbone of the MCU for the past decade now. Yes, many others have certainly played a huge, very important role and are beloved by the fans, and some no doubt have the potential to begin to fill the shoes of those that are leaving. But it's not going to be easy, if even possible, to truly begin to replace those three characters, and one of the characters it seems Marvel is going to push in the hopes of filling that massive void is Captain Marvel. And after what many will agree wasn't the most impressive performance in her debut movie, not that the movie itself didn't do extremely well at the box office, because it did, just that Brie Larson's performance didn't exactly captivate the hearts and minds of some of the fans who have seen it, well, it seems she has a very long way to go to ever hope to be on par with the likes of a Robert Downey Jr.'s Tony Stark. Though, let's be honest, there likely will never be any other character like that in the MCU, because he's easily one of the most iconic and charismatic characters in the history of film now. But if dealing with the loss of those three characters isn't hard enough, there's also the inevitable lull that will come after Endgame, once everyone exhales after holding their proverbial breath since the crazy ending of Infinity War, and again, once the Thanos chapter of the MCU has come to an end. And people will then have to ask themselves, do they care to do that all over again? Do they want to get on board the Marvel train and take another wild ride, one that will almost certainly be about building to another final confrontation against another new big bad villain some 10 years down the road? And sure, Marvel has plenty of awesome villains that could substitute for Thanos in the next go-round. That's really not the problem or the issue. Galactus is just one great example, and a personal favorite of mine, that they could use now that they have the rights to the Fantastic Four back after Disney acquired Fox. And along those same lines, they also have the rights to the X-Men now, which is easily the most exciting aspect of the future of the MCU to me, because as a huge fan of the X-Men, I'm dying to see what Marvel Studios does with them. Because Fox on their own was, well, extremely hit and miss with their movies, though they did give us Logan, which is one of the greatest superhero films to date. And speaking of Logan, or Wolverine, easily the most popular X-Men, at least within the general audience, well, he's a character that could of course begin to really fill that aforementioned void, assuming they could find the right actor to play him now, because much like Robert Downey Jr. is Iron Man, Hugh Jackman is Wolverine, and it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible really, to find an actor that embodies the role the same way he did and will be accepted by the fans, and it might very well be the most important task involved with bringing the X-Men into the MCU. Other than, of course, explaining where they've been all this time, because in the comic books, mutants have been around and have been a part of the Marvel Universe for decades now, pretty much as long as all of the major characters we all know and love have been a part of it. And some mutants have their origins linked to historical events, like the character Magneto greatly being shaped by the Holocaust during World War II. Though when you really stop and think about it, there are now problems with that origin story for him when you realize he'd have to be around, if not over, 100 years old at this point. You also have a problem with Wolverine, who is supposed to be well over 100 years old, and he has a very rich and detailed history that they'd no doubt like to explore, which means if mutants are a new thing in the MCU or have just started occurring, you have to also change his origin and make him an exception somehow that has been around for all this time. And what this all really means is the question becomes for Marvel and the MCU, do you change all these origins that fans know and love? Do you change the backstory of characters like Magneto and Wolverine, risking the ire of the fans, or do you get creative? I mean, do you really want to have it where they're now just starting to emerge, or mutations are now beginning to happen? Or do you have it where some, a small number most likely, have been in hiding all this time, and suddenly now more and more mutations are happening, and they can no longer fly under the radar? Or again, do you try and get creative, and whatever happens in Endgame may allow you to do just that? Because, as I said earlier, we know our heroes are going to win. We know they're going to beat Thanos and, for the most part, put things back to the way they were. The question is how and who lives and who dies, and what other unexpected repercussions there might be. Will our heroes use time travel to fix things, or will it maybe somehow involve the microverse? Could they possibly even use time travel to go back and get the Infinity Stones before Thanos collects them, if that could even work somehow? And if they are going to use time travel, and most leaks and rumors suggest that'll be the case, what if the Avengers go back in time in search of the Infinity Stones and somehow are now responsible for the creation or beginning of mutants? What if, for example, they somehow go way back to ancient Egypt and are responsible for the creation of Apocalypse? Or what if the ultimate solution to fix everything, to set everything right, now leads to a world where mutants have just always been there the whole time, and the only ones who realize the change are the Avengers who brought it about. But to everyone else, it's business as usual. One way or another, I do think they're going to get creative with it, and somehow make it so that mutants have just always been around. And again, Endgame might facilitate a way to almost do that naturally. In fact, it only makes sense if Endgame somehow, in some small way perhaps, begins to lay the groundwork for the next phase or phases of the MCU. Because I think about the last thing you'd want Endgame to do is to truly feel like an absolute end. Instead, you'd want it to very subtly hint at something else yet to come. You'd of course want to give people a satisfying conclusion to the past decade of Marvel films, absolutely, while also encouraging them to come along for the next 10 years. And hinting at the X-Men might be one of the best ways to do that. Either way, bringing in the X-Men will allow the MCU to add a whole new dynamic, and one I feel it will absolutely need going forward. Because if they basically use the same formula again, if they just slowly but surely build to another big showdown with a major villain, I think some people will grow weary and will check out along the way. And I'm not saying that won't be the case on some level, because there will almost certainly be a new overarching villain. But if you bring in the X-Men, you can juxtapose them with the Avengers, because they are very much not the same thing. The Avengers have traditionally been loved and celebrated by the world they inhabit, whereas the X-Men have not. Instead, most people fear and mistrust and even hate them. It's more like a curse that befalls you rather than a gift to be a mutant. And indeed, many mutant abilities, when they initially manifest, seem to completely ruin the life of the person. And what makes mutants interesting, and the X-Men in particular, is that they have to grapple with so many different elements that your regular old superheroes do not. They have these abilities which often ostracize them, which of course also makes them feared and hated, but yet they still seek to save and protect the world, and the people in it, who oftentimes make their lives a living hell. But what complicates things even further is they also have to protect mutant kind from humankind. They have to stand up and protect their own from the humans they're also trying to protect. Furthermore, they also have to fight their own kind at times to protect humans from mutants who think that they are the superior race. And these other mutants, who oftentimes feel completely justified in attacking humans, and do have good reasons to at times, only makes the job of the X-Men more and more difficult, and to make mutants more accepted, almost impossible. And such interesting dynamics lead to some fantastic characters, to some fantastic heroes and villains, and the potential for so many great stories to be told within the MCU. And honestly, that has been the key to the MCU's success in my opinion. It does a great job with its characters and getting people to truly love and care about them. You'll oftentimes hear people say Marvel movies are the same thing over and over again, and on some level, they're not wrong. But it's the characters themselves that keep bringing us back for more. And as I keep saying, we pretty much know the end result of Endgame, that our heroes will win. But what we want to see, yet what we're on some level afraid to see, is the price that these characters we've grown to love will have to pay. That's why we're going to see it. That's why it's already breaking box office records with ticket sales, because we need to see the final chapter of this story that involves so many of these amazing characters that we love. We need to know how it all ends for some of them. And I now have every confidence in Marvel Studios that they can really begin to do justice to the X-Men in a way that Fox sometimes failed at, and to make us all care about them on the same level we've grown to care about the Avengers. I mean, hell, if they can get us to love a talking raccoon in a tree that only says, "I am Groot," imagine what they can do with characters like Gambit that Fox only ever barely scratched the surface of in one movie. Not to mention, there's the potential for some interesting crossover between these two factions, like some X-Men joining the Avengers, for example, which has been seen in the comics. Or you could even build to a massive Avengers vs. X-Men type event movie. The possibilities really are endless, and I, for one, cannot wait to see how it all unfolds. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me how you think the MCU will handle the X-Men and bring them into the fold, or will they keep these two universes separate? Either way, let me know what you think in the comments below, and let's talk some Marvel. And until next time, thanks for watching.